So the book of Acts gives us the model for reaching the ends of the earth. So I'm in Burma right now. The island of Bali is absolutely spectacular. We are in Cambodia here. This is a beautiful family that lives in a village that we've done distributions with. In the Great Commission, let's remember Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations. And for us at World Mission, it's really important that the Word of God be a part of that. I mean, how can you really become a disciple if you don't have access to the Word of God? We are in Kor, the middle of Rendili land, and all these brothers are Rendili pastors. So are you guys happy about these units?
Yes.
All right. Cambodia is an amazing country. It's surrounded by Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand. And the 16 million people that live here, they say about 85% are Buddhists, and many of them have never heard the gospel for the first time.
Hello and welcome. This is the Great Commission Update. My name is Rusty Humphries, and my co-host is right there. He's Greg Kelly. Greg, lots going on in the Great Commission. Again, the Great Commission is what?
Boy, Rusty, it's great to be with you again. The Great Commission is Jesus' final words to his disciples, and it applies for all of us who call us and consider ourselves followers of him today. And basically what he said, Rusty, it's captured in a couple of places in the Gospels, the end of the book of Matthew and then also Mark. And he essentially said, all authority in heaven and earth is given to me. Therefore, he's passing it on to us. Go and make disciples of all nations. So he's really calling us and telling us to go into the world and share his good news of his story of what he did and how he loves all of humanity. And it's upon us and our generation to get that job done.
All right. So it's obviously an important thing. And a lot of people go out and do them. I mean, you've got people that go around and go to some of the gnarliest places in the world, but there are some people that get a calling and they go with their church group, maybe when they're in high school or after that, and they go on a short-term mission trip. That's all great, or is there good, bad, and ugly there?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a mixed story there, Rusty. It started probably 60s and 70s, this idea of short-term mission trips. And basically, in the early 1900s, it was the long-term missionaries. And the people that would go around the turn of the century were the people that would go to Africa, and they would literally pack all of their stuff in a casket because they knew it was a one-way trip. And
Really?
Everything would go in a casket because they literally knew that they were not coming back. And for the people, malaria took their life after 2-3 years. There's incredible amounts of stories of typhoid taking lives just after a couple of years being there. So people were literally all in and planned on giving it all. And then obviously with medicine and the advances in medical access, people were staying there longer, and so many people, Rusty, would give their lives in 30, 40 years to a mission field. And, so it's kind of like either you're literally all in and giving your whole life or really nothing.
Right.
And so I think the short-term emphasis came along to say, hey, maybe we can support some of these guys that are going out in the long-term aspect of it and just come alongside of them and encourage them for a week, 2 weeks, or a month. So it really started with a real, genuine heart and a real facilitating, helpful, aspect. And today there's still a lot of good things, but you're right. There is the good, there is the bad, and there is the ugly. And I think today it's fun to dig into that.
So some of the good I would think would be, and this is what I experienced, and that is you can't really understand how it is unless you've really been there. You can tell me stories all day long. I can tell stories all day long. We're both pretty good storytellers. But until you've seen there, it doesn't, or touch the soil, it doesn't have as much of an impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of the missionaries that are sent, their support base, whether it's finances or prayer or just encouragement, there's somewhat of a disconnect. I mean, I'm sending you a photo, I'm sending you my journal entry, and it just doesn't quite have the same effect until I've been there and I've experienced it. So a lot of the short-term emphasis was, hey, we're getting behind. It was all connected to the long-term missionary and kind of coming alongside of them. And you're absolutely right. When you go there and you taste it and you experience it, it has a transformational component to it. So
right.
As I said, the whole short-term mission emphasis and phenomena started out with a very pure and very genuine intentions, but it's really there's a lot of things that are happening that I think we need to be honest about and say, is this ultimately pushing the needle forward when we look at, again, Jesus' last words, go make disciples of all nations? And I think the answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about the positives. Mm-hmm. You've got negatives, and I'm curious, what is it that you're thinking?
Well, I think that there's the biggest negative is probably the issue of dependency and some of those things that can be caused. I mean, I think of a country like Haiti. So here it is in our own hemisphere, and we tell people all the time, Haiti is like an African country right here in our own backyard. I mean, you can get down to Miami in 2-hour flight from most parts of the United States, and then another 2-hour flight, and you're in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Now, the government, just from an aid standpoint, Rusty, so this isn't necessarily the church activity, but from a government standpoint, the 4 decades before this recent earthquake that happened that we all heard so much about. So 4 decades before that, they tracked that, and the government aid from the U.S. was over $8 billion.
Wow.
Of aid. And what they said is that from the beginning of that, when that aid started 4 decades earlier to the conclusion of that aid going in, Haiti as a whole was 25% more impoverished after the culmination of that aid. So
I don't understand. How can we give that kind of money and they're poorer? How is that possible?
Well, I think there's a number of things. It's infrastructural. There's a lot of corruption there. There's a lot of mismanagement. It's almost an attitude. There's a dependency that's created inside of Haiti where people are just conditioned to be recipient.
Right.
So it's the whole adage: am I going to teach someone to fish, or am I going to give them a fish? And I think in the church, we have to also adopt that same mentality and say, are we encouraging these people to grow, or are we just conditioning them to be benefactors?
Right.
And that's the real risk of the short-term mission, because when we go and they just associate us with handing out candy and balloons and giving them new shoes and soccer balls, we got a real problem.
Right. One of the things I saw in a documentary, and it was about the Clinton Foundation, and I'm not going to get political here, but let's just be real here. So a lot of money went to the Clinton Foundation after Haiti, and they came in and they spent a lot of money on rice. Now, rice, as I understand, was not a huge part of the Haitian diet, but because there was so much rice going into it, everybody started eating rice. And that put the rice farmers out of business in Haiti, because why would you buy rice from Haiti when you're getting it shipped in free from America? Is that that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and you can make a case even in the clothing business in East Africa. There's countries that have been decimated from the manufacturing of the clothing because of the used clothing that just gets poured in there and given away and given freely, and it destroys the jobs there. So it's
weird seeing New Kids on the Block T-shirts in Africa.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hey, look, I got a great Wham T-shirt. It's just kind of odd, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of cases where the idea of my good intentions are actually detrimental. It's this idea of when helping hurts. There's a book on that, When Helping Hurts. And we want to help as Americans. We're the most benevolent country and people in the history of humanity, right?
Absolutely.
But that can also work to the detriment when we're just conditioning people to be recipients. And a lot of the short-term mission trips, unfortunately propel that. There's stories that I've heard in the places, and particularly Christian orphanages are many times the recipients of it. And you've got orphanages that have said, hey, we don't need any more short-term teams. Literally, this one orphanage, the 6 consecutive teams that came in, they painted the walls different colors. And so
each team came in, they just painted a wall.
Each team came in and painted the same wall a different color. So the people who are receiving them feel obligated. Well, we got to put them to work. We got to have them do something. Right. And we're doing these menial tasks that really aren't moving the needle from a standpoint of making disciples of all nations. So, the other thing that goes on when we go to these just these orphanages, because, again, that's the recipient of so many of them, is we don't think about the emotional connection and detachment that goes on with these kids. And a lot of these places are saying, man, when these people come in, they love on our kids and we appreciate that. And that's wonderful. But then we have to deal with these kids and the trauma of emotional separation from the young girl or the guy, for that matter, whoever it is, who was loving like crazy on this kid for a week, and then they're gone. And we come back home and we're happy as a clam, and we're showing all of our friends our selfie photos of it. And, I call it the Me Mission selfie syndrome. I mean, right. We're looking to populate our social media with these photos, and we don't consider some of the deeper, issues that are going on with it. And we really have to be, realistic about these.
So are you suggesting then that regular folks like me shouldn't go on missions?
No, I think that there's definitely a role today for short-term mission trips. I think some of the things that are positive are if we go into it and we say, let's pour into, instead of, more the kids and the children that are everywhere, let's pour into the missionary. Let's invest in the mission family. I mean, missionaries are coming and going at unprecedented rates, Rusty, because of the stress that they're under, and they're coming back home quickly. I'm talking about expat missionaries.
Okay.
And so just to encourage them and love them in the calling that God's put on their life, but also the national missionaries. So when we go, if our objective is to come alongside of them, then that's a beautiful thing. If we go, secondly, with the idea of I'm there to serve and not kind of, this idea of self-glorifying myself, that's obviously a leading thing. And just this idea of just going to give them stuff, it creates dependency.
Okay. So then let's talk positive then.
Yeah.
If I'm very glad I went on my missions. I am. It is a great part of the fabric of my life. What makes a good mission trip then? Can you give me some practical tips? What would be a good trip? What should I do?
I think going into it with an idea of I'm going to learn from the culture is a good starting point. So I'm not coming into it and saying I have all the answers. A lot of times if we come into it, and let's just say we're a builder, we're a construction person, right? And we kind of know how to build stuff. And so I think going into it with an attitude of just great flexibility and saying, okay, I'm going to come alongside and serve these guys that are building. We built churches in Congo, I'm thinking of. And I can remember very, very vividly the guys who are the construction guys in Congo. Their idea of a plumb wall is very different than these professional construction guys I had with me on my team who are going crazy because it's kind of a little angled. But we're just kind of saying, hey, just relax. It's okay because we need to honor these guys. This is how look around you. All of the buildings look the same. All the walls are a little off. So just come alongside of them, learn from them. How do they build stuff here? It's not about us having to do it our way to make it right. So I think that is definitely a big point of it. But also, again, this idea of I want to learn. There's opportunities in these cultures for us to learn from them, how they do things differently, to experience their food, to learn a few words from their language. Oh my gosh, you want to bless them. Get a few greetings in your back pocket and use those and exercise those as much as you can. So I mean, those are some of the real practical things that we can do as we're going in there.
So what would you say if I went would be a successful trip? Can you, and because it can't all be about me.
No,
it can't all be about making them dependent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think, what is it I should be looking for?
One of the big questions I think we all need to ask ourselves is, what is the legacy impact? So in other words, after I'm gone, what kind of a lasting impact is going to be left because of my presence? And that goes back to, again, Jesus' final words, make disciples. So how have I moved the needle forward as far as making disciples of all nations? And if that has to do with, maybe there was some training that was involved, obviously with us, let's do a commercial for the Treasure, right? I mean, the Treasure is the solar-powered audio Bible. And so when our teams go, or when people associated with World Mission go, they're always leaving behind the Treasure. And it's really neat when we're on the airplane and we're leaving. And my team, I see them looking at each other and they're going, you know what? I bet they're listening to the Treasure right now. So it makes you feel like, wow, it's having an impact because of my presence and what I left behind. And Rusty, it can be so overwhelming when you go into places. You've seen it, right? That poverty just slaps you in the face and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, I just feel like a drop in the ocean here. But we need to think about it from a standpoint of what God can do and how we can participate in what God is doing, and really get behind that from the mission standpoint, the Word of God, long-term training and teaching, all those kind of things.
Is part of it maybe just do no harm? I go there and I look and I observe. Maybe I pass out a couple of treasures, but I kind of just stay in the background, or is that not enough?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely opportunities. I think some of the traditional short-term teams, we need to rethink how we're doing it all together. And if we're not coming alongside to accomplish some of those things that I mentioned, then we need to rethink, do I even go? I mean, we have to think about the financial element, right? It's costing $2,000 to $3,000 per person. You send 10 people. I mean, just think about that economic impact of $25,000 to $30,000. So if we're going and we're having these legacy footprints, we're being a blessing to the missionaries that's there, the vision that's already on the ground, whether it makes sense to us or not. That's not the point. It's us coming alongside of what God is already doing. But I think that, just the flexibility piece is huge. And if we can tap into, what God is already doing and create that long-term footprint, then there definitely can be a win in there. There's no doubt about it.
If you're watching on video, you'll be able to see this. If you're listening to the podcast, I want you to picture a big mason jar with a bunch of, what are those, gumballs? What is that behind you? They're gumballs. And they're a bunch of different colors. What is that?
Well, I have all these gumballs here as a reminder to us. And I think, the application for short-term missions is very prevalent, because what this represents, Rusty, is all of the resources that are going into the mission field today. So what they'll say is there'll be about 2 million people in the U.S. that'll participate in some kind of a short-term mission trip. And it's going to equate to about $2 billion, okay?
Wow.
So this $2 billion is inside of here. This represents all of the resources that are invested into unreached people groups, places that have never heard the gospel. And if we were to take one out, this is the amount that goes towards those places that have never heard the gospel. All of the rest of these gumballs are going to places where the gospel is already established, where there's already an indigenous church planting movement, and it's friendly places. And so when we think about even the unreached people groups and the short-term missions, most of our short-term mission trips, Rusty, are going to places that are friendly, that are easy to get to, that are maybe the most inexpensive, and quite honestly, they're the places that are already Christian. And so that's one of the things we need to rethink when we're talking about short-term missions, because we're going to the places that already everybody has already heard the gospel, or the Great Commission essentially has been fulfilled.
Right. On the other hand, though, you certainly want them to go to one of those places if they have this calling than you do, where Boko Haram is.
Yeah. I mean, I think from an exposure standpoint, again, we have to ask ourselves, what's the ultimate objective? If, for example, a church says, I want to send a short-term mission trip to Haiti to be a blessing to missionaries we support with, and then they've done some proper pre-trip planning and preparation, and then post-trip debriefing, which is critical. So how does that apply to you today? You're not the long-term missionary in Haiti. What are you going to do with that experience that God gave you? And then how are you going to use that, really in not just about Haiti, but from a worldview standpoint? And I think that becomes a very successful reason for going to a place that's already Christian. Let's not forget, we're talking about the Great Commission, obviously, and unreached people groups is such a focus of world mission. But, the Bible also has a great verse that says, pure and undefiled religion is caring for orphans and widows in their distress. So it all works together, right? The issue is there's a disproportionate amount of resources, including short-term teams, that are going to places already Christian. And so we need to just ask ourselves some of those harder questions instead of just, well, that's what we've always done. We've always sent our high school youth group to Haiti every year. That's not a very good reason to do that short-term mission trip.
Okay. Greg, I know there's a lot going on at World Mission. Quickly, any great commission updates, any stories going on around the world that folks need to know about?
Yeah, we just got some updates from Northern Kenya. We've been talking about Northern Kenya and the drought situation. There's a couple of new wells up there, so we've gotten some great encouragement from different villages among the Turkana people, which is, if you look at a map of Kenya, it's way up in the northwest corner bordering Ethiopia and Sudan, and the people have been so encouraged. At the same time, Rusty, that's an area where there's a lot of conflict among the people groups, and it's kind of, in a lot of ways, like the wild, wild west, where there's still cattle rustling and stealing camels and that kind of thing. And one of our partners, unfortunately, told of one of their friends who just recently was killed in one of those ambushes as you just watching his camels, and another group came through, and it's just devastated this particular family. And so, those are the real things just that we'd never hear about in the, in the media or the news that are going on a really a daily basis. So on one hand, we're celebrating what's going on there and some new water opportunities and new churches being planted, but also the reality of just how harsh these environments are that really haven't had a gospel witness yet. Okay, so if you want to help the Great Commission, if you want to help World Mission, best place to go is www.worldmission.cc, right, Greg? Right, that's right. They can go there and they can help us. And, one practical way, Rusty, when people do go on these short-term trips, take some treasures with you. So can people call you or write and get those to bring with them? Absolutely. Absolutely. The people that they'll be dealing with, we know, are going to be mainly oral learners. And so they'll be able to gather around and listen to the Word of God in the language that the people speak where you're going. So it's a phenomenal resource for these short-term mission trips. That's awesome. So how would they contact you to get those? They would either go to the website, worldmission.cc, or contact our office at 616-534-5689. Well, there's your Great Commission update. Greg Kelly, that's his name. I'm Rusty Humphries, and we'll see you next time here on the Great Commission Update.